I used to work as custodian at a middle school for almost 5 years, usually on the overnight shift. I'd clock in around 10 at night and stay until just before sunrise when the buses started arriving. At first, I actually enjoyed it. I didn't have to deal with kids running through the halls, teachers complaining, or really anyone at all. The quiet never bothered me. I liked being left alone to do my work. But as time went on, I started noticing how different the school felt at night compared to the daytime. It wasn't just quiet, it felt empty, almost lifeless. The building creaked and groaned like it was breathing. And when you're the only one inside, even the tiniest sound will put you on edge. A locker would pop open by itself, or the pipes in the walls would knock, and your brain would swear it was footsteps. I learned to ignore most of that, but the basement was different. The school was old, built in the 1950s, and the basement stretched under half the building. It wasn't clean or finished like the classrooms upstairs. It was a concrete maze of storage rooms and narrow hallways with pipes and wires hanging overhead. Some rooms were stacked with old desks, others had boxes of outdated textbooks, and a few were crammed with broken furniture. It always smelled damp and musty down there. The fluorescent lights buzzed and flickered when they worked at all. Most of the time, you needed a flashlight just to see. When I first started, one of the older custodians told me to avoid the basement unless it was absolutely necessary. He joked that it was haunted, but even during that first week, I could tell there was something off about it. It felt like stepping into a whole different world compared to the bright hallways upstairs. Sometimes I'd pass the basement door and feel a chill just looking at it. Luckily, I didn't have to go down there very often, so I usually avoided it. One night, about 2 years into the job, I had a list of tasks taped to my cart. One of them was to bring up folding chairs for an event. I groaned the second I saw it, because the only place those chairs were kept was a basement. I remember standing at the basement stairwell door for a solid minute, debating if I should call my supervisor and ask if it could wait until morning. But I didn't want to seem lazy, so I grabbed my flashlight and pulled open the heavy door. My boots echoed way too loud as I went down the stairs. At the bottom, I flipped the switch, but only a couple of overhead lights flickered on, leaving most of the hallway in darkness. The smell of wet cement hit me. I turned on my flashlight and started walking. The chairs were supposed to be in the second storage room on the left. The first room was filled with desks stacked up to the ceiling. The second door was rusted, and it squealed like nails on a chalkboard when I pulled it open. Inside, the air smelled like dust and old wood polish. The folding chairs were piled against the wall in uneven stacks. I'd bent down and started pulling them out, grabbing as many as I could carry, so I wouldn't have to make too many trips. I had just lifted for when I froze. Out in the hallway, I heard this faint dragging sound, like someone slowly sliding their shoe across the floor. I held my breath, crouched there with the chairs in my arms. Listening, the sound stopped. I stood up straight and peeked into the hallway, shining my flashlight both ways. The beam cut through the darkness, but nothing was there. My heart was pounding in my ears. I stood there for what felt like forever, finally convincing myself it was just the pipes, or maybe I'd shifted a chair without realizing it. I carried the first load into the hallway and started toward the stairs. That's when I felt it, a cold draft brushing across my face. It made me stop mid-step. The basement was always warm and stale, no windows, no airflow. But this felt like standing in front of an open freezer //. I shined my light up and down the hallway, but nothing looked different. I shrugged it off, set the chairs at the bottom of the stairs, and went back for more. When I stepped into the storage room again, something felt off. The stack of chairs seemed shifted, like they'd been moved while I was gone. I stared at them, trying to picture how they'd been leaning a second ago. I told myself I was being paranoid and grabbed another load. As I turned to leave, I heard it again, a soft thump, then a scraping noise coming from further down the basement corridor. My flashlight shook in my hand as I pointed it that way. About 20 feet down, one of the classroom doors that should have been closed tight was cracked open. My stomach dropped. I hadn't touched that door. The school was locked every night. No one was supposed to be there but me. I froze in the storage room doorway, staring. Every instinct screamed to drop the chairs and run upstairs, but I didn't move. I told myself maybe the door was loose, or maybe opening another door had changed the air pressure. I clung to those excuses. I rushed the chairs to the stairwell, then came back empty-handed with my flashlight. The door was still cracked, just wide enough for someone to peek out. My throat went dry. I edged forward, each step echoing. Close enough now, I called, "Hello? Anyone down here?" My voice sounded thin and small in the big empty basement. No reply. Swallowing hard, I shoved the door open and swept the flashlight inside. The room was empty. Dusty science equipment, stacked boxes, cobwebs in the corners. I stepped in for a second, heart-hammering, listening. Then I heard it again, a dragging shuffle. This time it was behind me, out in the hallway. I spun, beam cutting down the corridor. Nothing but shadow and concrete, but I could feel it. That heavy pressure like someone was watching. My skin went hot and cold. I didn't care about the chairs anymore. Backing out slowly, flashlight trained on the hall, I made for the stairs. At the top, I grabbed the chairs I had left and raced up 2 steps at a time, not stopping until I reached the main hallway. I was breathing like I'd run a sprint, leaning against the wall, sweating even though the building was cold. I told myself it was rats or pipes, but the cracked door didn't fit those explanations. I locked the stairwell door behind me, even though I probably shouldn't have, and didn't go back down the rest of the night. A week later, I was mopping the hall, right above the basement, when I heard again 3 loud bangs, spaced evenly like someone pounding on the wall. The mop slipped from my hand, and water splashed across the tiles. I froze, hard in my throat. The basement door rattled, as if someone shoved against it from the other side. My blood ran cold. I didn't open it. I stood there, gripping the mop handle, until the sound stopped. After that, I refused to go into the basement alone. If anything needed to come up, I'd wait for another custodian. I never told the others exactly what I heard. They'd either laugh or call it the ghost. But I know what I felt. Even now, thinking about those slow, dragging footsteps behind me makes me sick to my stomach. I worked as a janitor at a big high school for 3 years. Being the newest guy meant I usually got stuck on the graveyard shift. The building was massive, 4 floors and 2 gyms, and at night it felt like a confusing maze. Our routine was methodical. Room by room, floor by floor, lights off, trash emptied, doors locked. It took the whole night to get through everything, and if you hurried, you always missed something. One Friday night, I was alone because one of the other guys called in sick. We usually worked in pairs, so I wasn't used to being the only person there. The shift started normal enough. I began on the first floor, emptying bins, wiping counters, mopping the halls. Some of the old corridor lights flickered, casting weird moving shadows, but I told myself it was just the building acting up. Around midnight, I made my way to the 3rd floor. That level always made my skin crawl. It was quieter and had a bunch of older classrooms nobody used. Some rooms were locked forever. Others were storage. Dusty books, broken chairs, old lab gear piled up. Walking down the hallway, the sound of locker doors clicking and my boots echoing off the tile made me jump more than once. I kept telling myself it was normal. Halfway through mopping one main hallway, I saw a door about 20 feet ahead that was open. That hit me right away because I checked everything earlier and had locked every door. My first reaction was to walk past it and ignore it, but something made me stop. I leaned the mop against the wall and walked over slowly, trying not to make a sound. It was one of those old wooden classroom doors with a little square window. I pushed it open and shone my flashlight in. At first the room looked empty, desks shoved to the walls, boxes in corners. Nothing seemed out of place, until I noticed one box near the back was tilted. It wasn't lined up with the others, and there were scuff marks on the floor, like someone had dragged it. My stomach dropped. I knew I closed that door earlier, and I knew I hadn't touched that box. I told myself I was tired and seeing things. I shut the door and went back to mopping, but my head kept drifting to that room. I thought maybe a student had snuck in, so I considered checking the windows, but they were locked from the inside, and all the hallway doors were locked too. I tried to shake off the feeling that someone was watching me and forced myself to focus on the cleaning. After finishing the hallway, I headed to the stairwell to go down to the second floor. Passing the same classroom again, my heart nearly stopped. The door was wide open. I knew I'd closed it before. I crept closer and peered in. The room looked the same, except now the box was in the center of the floor. My pulse kicked. I whispered, "Hello? Is anyone here?" My voice sounded tiny in the empty building. No answer. Then from the back of the room, I heard breathing, slow and deep. Not the wind, not pipes, someone trying to be quiet, but making sure I could hear them. I tried to rationalize it as some kid hiding as a prank. But how would they have gotten in? I was supposed to be the only person there. All doors were locked. I slammed the classroom door and ran for the stairwell, heart pounding, sweat soaking my back. I pressed myself against the stairwell door and listened, debating whether to call my supervisor, even though I hated waking him in the middle of the night. Finally, I called. I told him what was going on and kept my voice as steady as I could. He said he'd be there in 20 minutes. Those 20 minutes stretched forever. I stayed as far from that room as possible, peeking back down the hall every few seconds, counting the time, and wishing someone would hurry up and show up. He finally showed up. We went back upstairs together. He had a big flashlight and walked right into the classroom. The box was still sitting in the middle of the floor. We tore the place apart. Closets, under desks, behind cabinets, nothing. He told me I was probably just tired or imagining things. I didn't argue, but I knew what I'd heard, that slow, heavy breathing. It wasn't a pipe or the HVAC. It was someone. I tried to finish the rest of the night with him there, but I couldn't stop looking at that room. The hallway felt colder and heavier than usual. Sweeping and mopping didn't help. Every time I passed the lockers, I waited for one to rattle. Every shadow looked like someone standing just out of sight. A few weeks later, while working with a different custodian, he told me a story. Years ago, a student had been found hiding overnight in that same classroom. They'd snuck in as a prank, and it scared the staff so badly they stopped using the room. That explanation fit, except for the breathing I'd heard that night. There hadn't been anyone else in the building. I finished a shift and left, but the feeling stuck with me. I started being extra careful. I made sure every door was locked behind me. I kept my flashlight aimed at the floor and stayed close to the stairwell when I had to go past that hallway. Months later, I had another solo overnight. I delayed going up to the third floor as long as I could. When I finally went, I hurried, expecting the same thing to happen again. The sense of being watched never went away. Even if I worked in a classroom far from that one, I felt eyes on me. Every creak of floorboard made me jump. I finished the shift and left as fast as I could, not daring to look back. After that, I refused to be assigned to that floor alone. For years, I avoided it whenever I could. I never learned for sure whether it had been a kid hiding or something else. But I'll never forget the sound of that breathing coming from a classroom that should have been empty. Sometimes, even now, I can still hear it in my head.